Saint Perpetua
was an early Christian martyr born 182 AD and died March 7, 203. She was imprisoned and killed for proclaiming her faith. Her story inspired other Christians to stay strong in their faith and trust in God in face of persecution.
During the early church, Christians were heavily persecuted, especially in Rome under oppressing emperors. Finally, when Emperor Constantine was brought forth to power, he even fought in God's name by bearing the Christian cross on his soldiers' shields instead of the Roman monogram. He also issued the Edict of Milan, where Christians were able to come out of the shadows and practice the faith freely without government persecution.
Gnosticism finds its roots in the Christian era before the first century had taken place in the Mediterranean Middle East. It is the belief that humans are souls trapped in material bodies created by a flawed, lesser god called the Demiurge. It also claims that Jesus never actually came in true physical form. Emperor Constantine called a general council addressing the issue in 325, but several Gnostics were invited, but none showed up, so the Catholic Church put an end to the heresy relatively easily. Pelagianism was proposed by Pelagius in the 1st century, and it is the belief that original sin did not have an impact on humanity and humans remain capable of choosing without God's assistance. Augustine, the Bishop of Hippo, opposed the heresy at the Council of Orange, in which they addressed the issue and came to the conclusion that due to Adam's sin, death and sin passed on to humanity.
3 bishops, one from Rome, another from Alexandria, and another from Antioch, stood forth. The schism was between the Eastern and Western Church and who was the rightful pope to rule the Church. It was not until Second Vatican Council that the Western Church recognized the validity of the sacraments in the Eastern Church.
Thomas Aquinas was born 1225 and died March 7, 1274. Thomas Aquinas focused on combining the Roman Catholic faith and Aristotle's reasoning. He tried to protect the Church against the rebirth of critical thinking by using critical thinking in order to defend the Church.
During medieval Western Europe, the Church was becoming increasingly more involved in political affairs, and they sold indulgences with the false promise that one could essentially buy their way into heaven. Martin Luther addressed that the problem leading to the corruption was rooted in the perversion of the Church's doctrine, and he was excommunicated by the Pope.
Galileo was born February 15, 1564 and died January 8, 1642. Galileo was shunned by the Church for his scientific research and teachings, but the Church eventually realized that they couldn't deny the truth in science. His great work helped lessen the division between science and religion.
The Second Vatican Council took place in St. Peter's Basilica in the Vatican from 1962 to 1965 and was overseen by Pope John XXIII and Pope Paul VI. The council addressed issues such as how the ancient church could survive in a world undergoing such radical transformations, as well as ways to update the church, which included the language of the Mass, the way the priest faced the congregation, and the participation level of the Mass attendees. The council put forth several constitutions, declarations, and decrees, with the constitutions being Lumen Gentium, Dei Verbum, Sacrosanctum Concilium, and Gaudium et Spes.